Black CEO, mocked by a white billionaire family 10 minutes later, she obliterates their $4. 9B deal. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. You must be lost. The words didn't come loud. They didn't need to. They were delivered with the casual certainty of someone who had never once been questioned in her life. A woman in an ivory silk gown stood at the center of the estate's marble foyer, crystal flute dangling from 2 fingers, eyes narrowed in amused contempt. Around her, laughter rippled, soft, polite, deadly. The estate itself was a monument to inherited power, arched ceilings cut from Italian stone, oil paintings older than nations, chandeliers dripping light like frozen rain. Old money breathed easily here. It always had. At the edge of the room stood the woman they were laughing at. She was calm, too calm. A black woman in a tailored midnight blue dress, no visible jewelry except a single watch on her wrist, no designer logo screaming for attention, no entourage, just posture, stillness, control. Someone whispered, "Who invited her?" Another voice followed, "Probably staff." Phones began to rise, slowly at first, then all at once, like a field of black glass turning toward its prey. This family's gatherings were famous not for generosity, but for spectacle, and humiliation had always been their favorite currency. The matriarch smiled, a thin, surgical smile. "This is a private event," she said, "for people who belong." Security shifted uncomfortably near the doorway. No one moved to intervene. No one ever did. The billionaire family had funded this town's hospitals, its politicians, its silence. The woman in blue took a measured breath. She had walked into boardrooms colder than this. Rooms where men twice her age and 10 times her arrogance had underestimated her before losing everything. But tonight wasn't supposed to be about power. Tonight was supposed to be about a signature. Her gaze drifted across the room, taking in faces that would soon beg her for mercy. They didn't know that yet. They still thought this was entertainment. The matriarch leaned closer, voice dropping just enough to sting. "You should leave before you embarrass yourself further." A pause. Then the woman in blue spoke, quietly, steadily. "I was invited." The laughter sharpened. "By whom?" Someone scoffed. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here." Now, back to Alana. Alana didn't repeat herself. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't explain. Power didn't beg for recognition, it waited. Her phone vibrated once in her hand. The matriarch noticed it and laughed again. "Calling for help?" Alana looked at the screen. No name, just a secure notification. Legal. Documents ready. Awaiting final authorization. 10 minutes earlier, this family had been celebrating, toasting, congratulating themselves on a deal they believed would save their collapsing empire. A $4.9 billion agreement negotiated through layers of lawyers and intermediaries. They had never bothered to learn what she looked like. Why would they? In their world, power always looked the same. Alana slid her phone back into her palm and lifted her eyes. Not angry, not wounded, calculating. Around her, the room felt different now. The laughter faltered. A few people sensed it, the shift, the pressure change before a storm. One guest lowered his phone. Another glanced toward the exits. The matriarch didn't notice. She never noticed danger until it was irreversible. "Escort her out," she said lightly. "We have real guests arriving." Alana nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "Of course," she replied. Not to them. To the voice already waiting on the other end of the line. The estate's lights glittered overhead, unaware that in less than 10 minutes, this family's name would become a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms across the world. They thought they were watching a woman being humiliated. They had no idea they were standing at the edge of their own collapse. The guards hesitated. Not because they doubted the matriarch, but because something in the room had shifted. and instinct is faster than loyalty. One of them glanced at Alana's face, searching for panic. There was none, just patience. The kind that unnerves people who are used to power being loud. "Mom," one guard finally said, lowering his voice, "if you'll come with us." Alana inclined her head. Polite. Measured, as if this were all proceeding exactly as planned. She took one step forward. The marble floor reflected the chandeliers above, light shattering into 1,000 fragments beneath her heels. Around her, conversations restarted in whispers, self-satisfied, careless. The family's guests were already rewriting the moment in their minds. By tomorrow, this would be a funny story. Another nobody put in her place. Near the center of the room, the patriarch watched quietly. He hadn't spoken once. His hand tightened around his glass as his eyes followed Alana, not with contempt, but calculation. Something about her bothered him. He couldn't say why. She looked familiar. At the threshold of the foyer, Alana stopped. The guard paused with her. "Everything okay?" "Yes," she said calmly. "I just need one moment." Behind them, the matriarch scoffed. Unbelievable. Even now she wants attention. Alana turned back not to the woman, but to the room. "May I ask a question?" she said. A ripple of irritation passed through the crowd. This wasn't how these scenes usually went. People like her were meant to disappear quietly. The patriarch frowned. "Make it quick." Alana's gaze locked onto him. "Do you know who I am?" Laughter burst out again. Louder this time. Crueler. The matriarch waved her hand dismissively. "If you were anyone important, we would know." That was the mistake. Alana nodded once, as if confirming something to herself. Then she raised her phone and unlocked it. The screen glowed. "Actually," she said, voice even, "you do know me. You just never bothered to look." The patriarch stiffened. Something cold slid down his spine. He recognized that tone now. Had heard it once before from a lender, years ago, moments before his first empire cracked. "Alana Washington," she continued, "founder and CEO of Aurelian Holdings." The name hit the room like dropped glass. One guest gasped. Another swore under his breath. Phones stopped recording and started shaking. The patriarch's face drained of color. "That's not—" He stopped himself. Because it was. Aurelian Holdings. The silent giant behind infrastructure funds, technology acquisitions, real estate rescues. The firm currently underwriting the deal that would save his family from insolvency. The matriarch laughed weakly. "This is ridiculous." Alana didn't look at her. "I believe your legal team is waiting," Alana said, eyes still on the patriarch. "They've been waiting all evening." The man swallowed hard. You were supposed to arrive later." "I did," Alana replied. "I arrived when I was told to come. I just didn't arrive how you expected." Silence fell, heavy, suffocating. Somewhere in the back, a guest whispered, "She owns half the city." Alana's phone vibrated again. Legal, standing by, confirmation needed. She glanced down, then back up. "This evening," she said calmly, "was meant to mark the beginning of a partnership." Her eyes swept the room, faces pale now, arrogance leaking out of them like air from a punctured tire. "But partnerships," she continued, "require respect." The matriarch took a step back. "We can explain no," Alana said softly. "You already did." She turned toward the exit again, this time without asking permission. Behind her, the patriarch found his voice, thin and desperate. "Miss Washington, please, let's talk privately." Alana paused at the door. "Just long enough. 10 minutes, she said. "That's how long you have." Then she walked out into the night air, leaving behind a room full of people who had finally realized the cost of underestimating silence. Inside, panic began to spread, because every single one of them knew exactly what came next. The door closed behind Alana with a soft, expensive click. Inside the estate, chaos didn't explode. It crept. At first, no one moved. Glasses hovered midair. Conversations died unfinished. The chandeliers continued to glow, oblivious, their light now illuminating faces stripped of confidence. The patriarch was the first to react. "Find our attorneys," he snapped, already pulling his phone from his pocket. Now. People scattered. A woman near the bar whispered frantically to her husband. Another guest quietly deleted a video from her phone, hands trembling. The matriarch stood frozen, her smile collapsing into something brittle and confused. "This is absurd," she said, too loudly. "She's bluffing." No one answered her, because everyone in that room knew the truth. Aurelian Holdings didn't bluff. In a side corridor, the family's chief financial officer paced, sweat beading at his temples as he spoke into his headset. "She's real," he hissed. "Washington. It's her. I've seen her signature. This deal is the only thing keeping us liquid." "How bad?" someone asked. The CFO closed his eyes. "Without it, catastrophic. Insolvency, asset seizures, public collapse." Words no one at this level ever thought would apply to them. Outside, Alana stood beneath the open night sky. Cool air brushed her skin, steadying. Her car waited nearby, engine idling, driver silent and professional. She didn't get in. Not yet. She checked her phone again. Messages stacked neatly, efficiently. Legal. Opposition counsel requesting immediate call. Finance. Exposure confirmed. Family over-leveraged beyond projections. PR. No leaks yet. Monitoring. She exhaled once, slow. Behind her, through tall glass windows, she could see movement. Panic now. Real panic. The kind that stripped people of manners. 10 minutes. She remembered her grandmother's voice, years ago, calm but unwavering. Never rush justice. Let it arrive on time. Inside, the patriarch finally cornered his wife near the staircase. "Do you understand what you've done?" she recoiled. I didn't know who she was. His eyes burned. "That doesn't matter." He turned away from her and dialed again, this time with shaking hands. When the line connected, he didn't waste breath. "Miss Washington," he said, forcing steadiness. "Please, let us speak." Alana answered on the first ring. "You have 7 minutes left," she replied. His voice cracked just slightly. "We apologize for the misunderstanding." "No," Alana said calmly. "You apologize for the behavior." Silence. Then smaller now. "Yes, for the behavior." "Good," she said, "because misunderstandings can be corrected. Character cannot." Inside the estate, the matriarch listened from a distance, dread blooming. This wasn't negotiation. This was judgment. "We can make this right," the patriarch continued quickly. "Well, issue a statement." "Well, you'll listen," Alana interrupted. For once, her gaze lifted to the windows, to the silhouettes scrambling behind the glass. "You had power tonight," she said, "and you used it to humiliate someone you thought was beneath you." "That wasn't don't," she warned. "Quiet. Final." The patriarch swallowed. "What do you want?" Alana looked at the countdown on her screen. 3 minutes left. "I want you to understand something," she said. "This deal wasn't your salvation. It was your test." She paused. "And you failed it." Inside, someone shouted that the markets in Asia were already opening. Another voice yelled about lenders calling back lines of credit. The matriarch finally understood. Not the money, the meaning. Alana continued, voice steady as stone. "In a few minutes, your attorneys will receive notice. The $4.9 billion agreement will be withdrawn." "No," the patriarch breathed. "Please, effective immediately." The words landed like a sentence. Alana glanced at her phone. 10 minutes had passed. "Time's up," she said. She ended the call. Inside the estate, the patriarch lowered his phone slowly, his world unraveling in silence. Across the room, the matriarch met his eyes and saw something she had never seen before. Fear. Outside, Alana finally stepped into her car. As it pulled away, the estate receded into the darkness, still standing, still lit but already hollow. The collapse had begun. The first notification hit before the car reached the gate. Inside Aurelian Holdings' legal war room, lights snapped on. Screens bloomed to life. Attorneys who had been home minutes earlier were now seated, jackets on, faces composed, hands moving with quiet precision. This wasn't chaos. This was protocol. Operation Blackout. Alana watched the updates scroll across her phone as the city lights streaked past the window. Legal. Withdrawal notice delivered to opposing counsel. Finance. Funds escrowed. Access revoked. Compliance. All obligations terminated per morality clause. The morality clause. She had insisted on it years ago, after watching too many powerful men escape consequences with apologies that cost them nothing. Respect wasn't a suggestion. It was a condition. Inside the estate, that condition was detonating in real time. The patriarch stood at the head of the room, tie loosened, jacket discarded, barking orders that no longer carried authority. Phones rang unanswered. Advisors spoke in half-sentences. Someone spilled a drink and didn't bother cleaning it up. "What do you mean revoked?" The matriarch snapped at the CFO. He didn't look at her. "I mean the funds are gone. The bridge loan disappears at midnight." Midnight was 12 minutes away. A guest slipped out quietly, then another. By the time the first news alert buzzed, half the room was already empty, people fleeing association, not out of loyalty, but instinct. Breaking. Aurelian Holdings withdraws from $4. 9B agreement effective immediately. The patriarch's phone vibrated. Once, twice, a dozen times. He stared at the screen as if it might lie. "Call her," the matriarch hissed. "Fix this." "There is no fixing this," he said hollowly. Across the room, their son scrolled frantically through social media, his earlier video now buried beneath headlines. The narrative had flipped. What had been mockery was now evidence of arrogance. Outside the city, servers synchronized. Markets reacted. Lenders recalculated risk in cold algorithms that didn't care about family names or charity boards. Alana's phone buzzed again. PR. Media requesting statement. Alana. Denied. Silence stands. She leaned back, eyes closing for just a moment. Not from exhaustion, from certainty. At the estate, the matriarch finally broke. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "We're pillars here." The CFO finally looked at her. "You were." In the distance, sirens wailed not for them, but it sounded like judgment anyway. The patriarch lowered himself into a chair that had hosted senators and governors. Now it held a man watching a century of privilege evaporate in under an hour. At the edge of the city, Alana's car slowed as it approached her building. Glass and steel rose ahead, modern, quiet, unassuming. She owned it outright, had for years. They'd never asked. Her phone chimed one last time. Legal. All actions complete. Deal terminated. Exposure contained. She replied with a single word. Confirmed. Inside the estate, midnight struck. Somewhere deep in the house, a grandfather clock began to chime steady, indifferent. With each strike, another creditor's call went unanswered. Another door closed. The matriarch stared at her reflection in a gilded mirror, makeup flawless, eyes hollow. For the first time in her life, she understood what it felt like to be dismissed. Outside, Alana stepped out of the car and looked up at the skyline. The city didn't care who ruled the night before. It only remembered who held power when it mattered. She turned and walked inside. Behind her, the billionaire family's empire didn't collapse with fire or spectacle. It unraveled. Quietly. Exactly the way they had tried to humiliate her. Morning didn't bring relief. It brought clarity. By sunrise, every major financial outlet had the same headline phrased a dozen different ways, none of them kind. Billionaire family loses $4. 9B deal after public incident. Aurelian Holdings walks away, markets react. Silence, from CEO, Alana Washington. The absence of a statement said more than any apology ever could. Inside the family's estate, the night had never really ended. Curtains remained drawn. Phones lay scattered across marble tables like spent shells. No one slept. No one dared leave. The patriarch sat alone in his study, jacket still draped over the back of a chair, eyes fixed on a spreadsheet that refused to balance no matter how many times he refreshed it. Assets frozen. Credit lines tightened. Long-time partners suddenly unavailable. The matriarch paced the hallway outside, heels clicking sharply against the floor, the sound echoing too loudly in a house that had grown unfamiliar overnight. "This is temporary," she said aloud, as if the walls needed convincing. "They'll come back. They always do." No one answered. Their son stood near the window, watching delivery vans pass the gate without slowing. He refreshed his phone again and again, watching his own name trend not for wealth or influence, but as a footnote to arrogance. The family lawyer finally arrived mid-morning, face pale, briefcase heavy. "It's worse than we thought," he said quietly. The patriarch didn't look up. "Define worse. Lenders are invoking cross-default clauses. One deal falling apart triggered others." "We're exposed." "How exposed?" The lawyer hesitated. "If nothing changes." "Very." The matriarch's voice cut through the room. "Then change it." The lawyer met her eyes. "We tried. She's not taking calls." Silence followed, thick, humiliating. Across the city, Alana moved through her morning with unremarkable precision. Coffee poured, tablet opened, messages reviewed. She wore no triumph, no satisfaction, just alignment. Her assistant stood nearby, careful with her tone. "The board is asking if you'd like to reconsider." "There's pressure." Alana looked up. "From whom?" "A few old names. They're worried about precedent." Alana nodded once. "So am I." She scrolled, paused, then spoke calmly. "Let this be it. No gloating, no interviews. No victory lap. Power didn't need witnesses." At the estate, the matriarch finally stopped pacing. Her reflection caught her eye in a mirror shed past 1,000 times before. For the first time, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. She lowered herself onto a bench, suddenly tired. "They didn't even fight," she whispered. The patriarch closed his eyes. "That's how you know it's over." "From whom?" "A few old names. They're worried about precedent." Alana nodded once. "So am I." She scrolled, paused, then spoke calmly. "Let this be it. No gloating, no interviews. No victory lap. Power didn't need witnesses." At the estate, the matriarch finally stopped pacing. Her reflection caught her eye in a mirror shed past 1,000 times before. For the first time, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. She lowered herself onto a bench, suddenly tired. "They didn't even fight," she whispered. The patriarch closed his eyes. "That's how you know it's over." Across town, the estate lights flickered on as evening settled. The house still stood, the art still hung, but the illusion, the one they'd lived inside for generations, had finally shattered. And in that quiet realization, the matriarch understood the true cost of the night before. They hadn't lost a deal. They'd revealed who they were to someone who never needed their approval, and she had believed them. By the third day, the world had adjusted. Markets always did. The billionaire family's name no longer opened doors. It slowed conversations, introduced pauses. People who once rushed to return calls now let them ring. Assistants offered polite deferrals. Calendars suddenly filled up for months. The collapse wasn't dramatic. It was procedural, which made it worse. At the estate, movers arrived quietly, not to take furniture, but to inventory assets. Paintings were cataloged. Sculptures measured. Insurance adjusters walked through rooms they'd once admired as guests. The matriarch watched from the balcony, arms folded tightly across her chest. Every item had a story, a gala, a donation, a photograph with someone important. None of it mattered now. Below her, a junior appraiser paused before a portrait of the family's founder. He checked his tablet, frowned, then typed something in. The matriarch felt the smallest, sharpest sting of humiliation. Being assessed. Inside, the patriarch met with advisors who spoke carefully, as if volume might worsen the numbers. "We can sell the coastal property," one suggested. "That buys time." "How much?" the patriarch asked. "Months, not years." The matriarch scoffed bitterly. "We built this city." The advisor didn't look up. The city moved on. Across town, Alana attended a small meeting, no press, no ceremony. Just a handful of executives and community leaders seated around a modest table. The topic wasn't the deal. It never was. It was the after. "I want the funds redirected," Alana said, hands folded calmly. "Education, housing, legal aid." Someone hesitated. "That's a significant reallocation." "Yes," Alana replied. "That's the point." She didn't say the family's name. She didn't need to. Everyone knew where the money had come from, and why it was now going somewhere else. Later that afternoon, the matriarch learned about the redirection from a headline she couldn't avoid. Former deal funds reassigned to community initiatives. She read it twice, 3 times. "She's turning this into charity," she whispered. The patriarch didn't respond. He was staring at another screen, this one showing a list of invitations rescinded. Events canceled. Boards quietly reshuffled. They were no longer required. In the kitchen, staff packed personal belongings into small boxes. Not out of anger, out of foresight. They'd seen this before, just never this close. That evening, the matriarch finally sat down across from her husband, exhaustion settling into her bones. "She never raised her voice," she said. "Not once." He nodded slowly. "She didn't need to. For the first time, there was no one left to blame. Not the market, not politics, not misunderstandings, just choice." Across the city, Alana returned home as dusk painted the skyline in soft gold. She removed her jacket, set her phone down, and stood by the window for a long moment. Her reflection stared back unchanged. She thought of the room, the laughter, the assumption. Then she let it go, because justice wasn't something you revisited, it was something you completed. That night, the estate lights dimmed earlier than usual, not for mourning, but because fewer rooms were being used. In the silence, the matriarch understood what the humiliation had truly been. Not being corrected, but being rendered irrelevant. And that realization settled heavier than any financial loss ever could. The reckoning didn't end with headlines. It never did. A week later, the family's final attempt at relevance arrived in the form of a carefully worded apology, printed on thick cream paper, signed in blue ink, delivered by courier to Aurelian Holdings headquarters. Alana never opened it. Her assistant did, read it once, then placed it quietly into a folder labeled "Declined." No response was sent. Silence had become policy. Across the city, the family gathered for the first time since the collapse, not for strategy, not for optics, but because there was nowhere else to go. They sat in a smaller room now. Fewer portraits, less light. The patriarch looked older. Not from age, but from subtraction. "We can still recover," their son said, voice tight with forced confidence. "People have short memories." The matriarch didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was flat. Not when the lesson is clear. She had replayed that night more times than she could count. The calm, the restraint. The moment shed assumed power meant volume. She knew better now. That afternoon, Alana stood at the dedication ceremony for a new community center, modest, unbranded, funded quietly. No speech was scheduled, no press release issued, just doors opening. A young woman approached her hesitantly after the ribbon was cut. "Miss Washington," she said, eyes shining, "I didn't know someone like you existed." Alana smiled gently. "We've always existed." The woman nodded, swallowing emotion. "Thank you." Alana watched her walk inside, then turned away. Gratitude wasn't the goal. Access was. Back at the estate, another call came in, this time from an old ally, voice cautious. "We're distancing ourselves." "For now." The patriarch closed his eyes. "I understand." When the call ended, the matriarch finally spoke. "Do you think she ever thinks about us?" He considered it, then shook his head. "No." The truth settled between them. They had mistaken cruelty for leverage, status for permanence, silence for weakness. They had been wrong on all counts. That evening, Alana reviewed one final report. It detailed the redistribution of funds, the stabilization of partner organizations, the closure of the matter. At the bottom, a note from legal, no residual exposure. Matter concluded. She signed once and closed the file. Outside her window, the city pulsed, unconcerned, relentless, alive. It didn't mourn fallen dynasties. It absorbed them. Across town, the matriarch stood alone in a darkened hallway, fingers brushing a wall where a plaque once hung. It had been removed quietly, without ceremony. She exhaled, long and slow. For the first time in her life, she understood something fundamental. Respect was never owed to power. Power was earned by restraint. And restraint, she realized too late, had been the one thing Shed never practiced. As night fell, Alana turned off the lights in her office and walked out without looking back. The story had reached its end. Not with applause, but with balance restored. The world moved on faster than anyone expected. A month later, The billionaire family's name appeared only in footnotes, case studies, analyst panels. Quiet warnings passed between executives who had learned to listen. Their former influence hadn't been destroyed. It had been diluted, which was far more permanent. The estate went on the market without announcement. No gala, no farewell. Just a discreet listing circulated among buyers who valued square footage more than legacy. The matriarch watched from the window as strangers toured rooms that once felt untouchable. She caught fragments of conversation, great bones, overpriced, needs updating, needs updating. She almost laughed. The patriarch signed documents at a smaller desk now, pen trembling slightly as he adjusted to a life where every signature mattered again. No safety nets, no deference, just consequence. Across the city, Alana sat in a lecture hall she had funded quietly, listening rather than speaking. A panel discussed leadership, ethics, responsibility. Her name was mentioned only once, in passing. She preferred it that way. After the event, a young man approached her, nervous but determined. "Miss Washington," he said, "how do you know when to walk away from power?" Alana considered the question. "When power forgets dignity," she replied. "It's already empty." He nodded, writing it down as if it were scripture. Later that evening, Alana stood alone on her balcony, city lights stretching endlessly below. She thought briefly of the estate of marble floors and careless laughter, and felt nothing. That, she realized, was the final victory. Across town, the matriarch sat in a nearly empty living room, packed boxes lining the walls. She held a photograph she hadn't thrown away. A crowded gala, smiling faces, certainty frozen in time. She turned it face down and slid it into a box marked archive. Not trash, just past. Outside, the city hummed. New deals formed, new names rose. The cycle continued, indifferent and precise. And somewhere within that vast machinery, a quiet truth had settled. Justice didn't need a stage. It only needed someone willing to walk away with integrity intact. As night deepened, Alana closed the balcony door and turned off the light. The story no longer belonged to the family who lost everything. It belonged to the woman who never had to raise her voice to claim what was already hers. The story didn't end with a headline. It ended quietly, like most things that matter. On a clear morning, weeks later, Alana walked through a renovated public school on the south side of the city. Fresh paint, new computers, classrooms filled with voices that hadn't learned yet to shrink themselves. No cameras followed her, no plaques bore her name. A teacher approached, smiling. "They know someone believed in them," she said. "That changes how they sit in their chairs." Alana nodded. That was enough. Across town, the former estate stood empty, curtains gone, driveway silent. The gate no longer guarded anything worth protecting. A contractor's truck idled out front, workers discussing demolition plans, what to keep, what to tear down. Legacy, reduced to square footage. The matriarch passed by once. In a car she no longer drove herself. She didn't stop. There was nothing left to confront there. The building had already forgotten her. At Aurelian Holdings, the deal was officially closed, file archived, numbers settled, risk neutralized. The board moved on. New opportunities rose. No one spoke about the family anymore. They didn't need to. Late one evening, Alana sat alone in her office, city lights flickering beyond the glass. She reread a single line in a report she hadn't noticed before. Incident resolved without escalation. She smiled faintly. Because that was the point. Power didn't have to crush to be complete. It only had to refuse to tolerate what was wrong. She stood, turned off the light, and walked out. Somewhere in the city, a young woman would walk into a room tomorrow and be treated differently, not because the world had suddenly become fair, but because someone before her had drawn a line without shouting. That was how change moved. Not loudly, not all at once, but permanently. And as the night settled over the skyline, one truth remained clear, immovable, earned. Dignity doesn't ask for permission. And justice, when carried with restraint, never needs applause.